In this video, I wanted to highlight what I consider two essential measuring tools every modeler should have. The first is a digital or Vernier caliper. This type of caliper is actually three tools in one. Most often it is used to measure outside dimensions, but it can also measure inside dimensions as well as functioning as a depth gauge. And while there are dedicated tools that are more accurate for measuring each specific dimension, a caliper is usually good enough for our general modeling work. Digital calipers have the advantage of being easy to read, can be switched from standard or metric units, and can also be used to calculate dimensional differences on the fly. The disadvantage is no battery, no caliper. Another type of caliper is the Vernier caliper. Those of us who are old enough to remember these are very familiar with the Vernier. You read the dimensions right off the scale. How accurate is a Vernier? Well, it was accurate enough for the people who designed and built these. A Vernier scale is an additional scale that is used to calculate the dimension in between the main increments on the basic scale. The basic scale of a standard Vernier caliper is marked off in increments of 0.025 inches. So in this case, the caliper is measuring something that is between 0.75 and 0.775 inches. But what is the in-between distance? Look along the Vernier scale and find any mark that lines up perfectly with any mark on the basic scale. In this case, the increment 9 on the Vernier lines up perfectly. This is the number in thousandths that is added to the initial number off the basic scale. So the final measurement is 0.759 inches. Well, that's peachy, but right now you're saying, why should I even bother with a Vernier caliper? Let's just say it's 11 o'clock at night, the cat knocks over your drill stand, and you find your digital caliper is dead with no spare battery. So for me, both have their place, and I think it's just good form to know how to read a Vernier. Rather than a locking screw, some calipers have a thumb lock. Depressing the lock releases the sliding jaw. Because the jaw locks automatically when the lock is released, I find this type extremely useful when I want to transfer a dimension. This caliper is equipped with a locking block and a fine adjustment screw to precisely move the jaw. Calipers are also available with a dial. I'm not a fan of these calipers as they're more susceptible to shock and dirt causing issues with the dial indicator and gears. These days, most all digital calipers have an automatic shut-off, but some, like my old Mitutoyo, have an off and on button, which I actually prefer. The depth gauge portion is most typically like the example on the top, but some calipers use a rod. The depth portion is usually the least accurate, so you want to minimize error by always zeroing it out. Because there's a shim between the slide and the movable jaw, using too much force on the jaws can cause a misalignment and an inaccurate reading. This is one reason that a micrometer is more accurate for this type of measurement. The heavy frame and threaded action of the micrometer greatly reduces error. When using a micrometer, I rarely reach for my digital. Even a small 1-inch digital micrometer is extremely clunky and cumbersome in my hand when compared to a standard 1-inch mic. The other measuring tool that every modeler should have is a square, or rather squares. Because of our small work, I find it necessary to have a wide variety of sizes. These small squares were simply cut from 10,000th brass. As a general rule, adjustable squares are not as accurate, but nevertheless they're extremely useful. To check the accuracy of a square, draw a line with your square. Then flip it over and draw another line very close to the original line. If they're exactly parallel, then your square is square. If it's within your budget, you might want to consider one of these combination adjustable squares. These include a protractor as well as a center. Finally, poor quality or inaccurate measuring tools are worthless. For more information on these as well as other measuring tools, check out my webpage on measuring tools. The link is also in the video description below.